Welcome to the Success in Africa podcast with Dr. Modupe, your weekly dose of leadership vitamins to make you successful in Africa.
Hello, and welcome to the Success in Africa podcast. My name is Dr. Modupe Taylor Pierce, and I am a scholar and practitioner of leadership and organizational development. Simply put, I study what makes people successful. I have been studying this for 3 decades with a particular focus on people in Africa. And in this episode, I share stories, lessons, and insights about people having success in Africa. I created this podcast because I have a vision for Africa. I have a vision of Africa becoming a middle-income continent by the year 2030 and a high-income continent by the year 2040. And for that to happen, I need you and every other African watching or listening to this podcast to become successful. So, if you want to be successful in Africa, I encourage you to like and subscribe to this podcast. This episode is brought to you courtesy of BCA Online, the one-stop shop for mastering leadership. Joining BCA Online is free, and it gives you access to countless hours of knowledge, videos, and a plethora of resources on leadership that will enhance your capacity. Also, if you have questions that you want me to answer after watching this video, just log on to BCA Online. The link is on the screen and you can post your questions there. That is where I will respond. Today, we're going to shine the spotlight on a powerhouse from South Africa, Polo Leteka, a bold and visionary entrepreneur, investor, and one of the most influential women in Africa's venture capital landscape. You may recognize her as one of the judges on South Africa's Dragon's Den, but her story extends far beyond the television screen. You see, Polo is a woman who is helping African entrepreneurs, particularly women, to access capital, mentoring, and markets. Polo was born in Lesotho and raised in a small town in the Free State province of South Africa. She was drawn very early on to the world of numbers and business. Why? Because several of her relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings, they have their own businesses. These include a laundromat, a shop, childcare business, and an interior design company. So from an early age, she was exposed to the thrills and the chills of entrepreneurship. It gave her a really early glimpse of the hardships and the challenges that an entrepreneur often has to deal with. She then studied accounting at the University of South Africa, later on earned her MBA. And with the firm belief that African women deserved a stronger seat at the economic table, she started her professional career. She worked for SNG Grant Thornton and Allocap, an investment and financial services company, where she learned about investment banking, venture capital, and private equity. While she was working full-time in Pretoria, she started a bed and breakfast business in Mahikeng. She saw a need for one because her job required her to travel quite a bit. And because she was always on the road, she saw that there was a need for bed and breakfast for business travelers. And she thought, hey, I'll satisfy that need. But she was traveling. She was working hundreds of kilometers away from the business. So she hired her mom and her cousin to run the business. Guess what? They ran it to the ground. Polo learned a very powerful lesson about the importance of hiring top-class staff and keeping them accountable instead of just hiring your family. Now, luckily for her, because she was working full-time, she could afford the loss, and she continued to invest little by little in real estate. She left the bed and breakfast behind. Later on, she then left Alocap and joined the South African Department of Trade and Industry, where she developed the first BEEE codes of good practice designed to accelerate Black economic empowerment in the private sector. For those who are not familiar with, BEEE, this was a policy established by the South African government after the fall of apartheid to essentially right the wrongs of the white economic empowerment that existed during apartheid. So Polo realized just how high the barriers to entry are for small and medium enterprises to grow in South Africa, and frankly that these barriers were not always a lack of capital, but frankly a lack of capacity, of awareness amongst the founders of these small and medium-sized enterprises. There was a need for a service, she felt, that would connect investors who were looking for good investments and entrepreneurs or founders who frankly didn't know where to find these investors or didn't know how to pitch their companies effectively to these investors. And this is how IDF Capital was born. So she started this with a co-founder, with a partner, and started a company. The idea behind it was that it would be an investment firm that supports, yes, small and medium-sized enterprises in South Africa, but with a specific focus on women-owned business. Remember, I shared with you that she had developed this passion and this recognition that there needed to be more support for women in high positions of authority and business. You see, Polo understood that while many women entrepreneurs had the passion and the ideas, what they lacked was access to finance and mentoring. And that's what IDF Capital was created to provide. Now, like many businesses, its early years were a little tough. It was a struggle to get the big institutional investors to trust her and her business partner with funds to manage. Yes, they started it with some of their own funds. Yes, they started it with some individual investors. But for IDF Capital, they really needed institutional investors to come on board. And in the first few years, there were just so many rejections. To make ends meet, Polo was forced to sell her properties, including the house that she had been living in. In fact, at some point, their financial situation became so dire that Polo was ready to give up. She even told her business partner, hey, we're going to have to close down if we don't secure some funding by the end of the month. Providentially, an institutional investor that they had made a pitch to finally made a capital commitment to their fund that month, which allowed them to get back on track. That contract was the tipping point, and IDF never looked back. You see, Polo's experience gained from her own business investments, as well as the investments of her relatives, and having seen them and worked in them, gave her a keen eye for what would make a business idea successful and what would make it not successful. Her initial successes in the investment as IDF yielded greater confidence in her investors to make even further and bigger investments into her fund. Later on, IDF Polo co-founded the Alethea IDF Fund, which is a $100 million Pan-African investment fund for women entrepreneurs, the first of its kind. Through this fund, she's been able to reach women across Africa, especially in the big markets of Nigeria and South Africa, showing that women-led ventures are not just charity cases, but they are some of the continent's most powerful engines of growth. You see, Polo started from her own business, learning, failing, learned more about investments, started her own investment capital business with some of her own money, finally got institutional investment, invested in South African women-owned companies, and as she showed her success, then she was given the capital to go Pan-African. What a success story. Now, there are a number of takeaways from Polo Leteka's remarkable journey, but I'm going to distill them into 3. Number 1, if the system excludes you, build a new one. You see, Polo saw how traditional capital systems failed to serve African women, and so she created one that did. Her firm has backed dozens of entrepreneurs, providing not just funding, but also business development support to assure their long-term stability and sustainability. In fact, what she says is, redesign the system if it doesn't serve you. Don't wait for inclusion. Create the structures that reflect your values. You want to be successful as an entrepreneur? Sometimes you have to create that success. Lesson number 2 from Polo's journey. Capital is not enough. Capacity is key. You see, Polo realized that simply raising capital or giving money to founders wouldn't assure their success, because poverty and wealth exist between the ears. Part of the reason why they couldn't access money was because of what they didn't know. They needed capacity building. So IDF has been successful because it doesn't just give money to entrepreneurs. It also gives capacity. Polo believes in holistic empowerment. They provide financial management, governance, marketing, leadership training. She empowers beyond just the check. See, Polo really believes that true leadership happens when you equip others with the tools that they need to thrive so that they don't even depend on you long term. And that's why she says capital isn't enough. Capacity is key. That's lesson number 2. Lesson number 3, representation matters. You see, as a woman in a male-dominated society, Polo has shattered glass ceilings, not just by entering boardrooms, but frankly, by owning them. See, she serves as a director on multiple boards, she advises governments, she coaches emerging entrepreneurs, especially women, and she coaches them to believe in their own value and raise their voices. She's a huge believer of elevating others as she rises. This is really important, especially in Africa, because when you become successful, it's important that your success is not just a solo game. You see, Polo is not just an investor. She's a builder of builders, a leader who's using capital, yes, courage, conviction, and leadership training to shape better entrepreneurs, more successful companies, and eventually a better Africa. You see, in her story, I'm reminded, and you're reminded, that African success is not a solo sport. In being successful, we need to create the kind of ecosystems that will provide for others to thrive. This is the final lesson, that success is not a solo sport. Polo didn't get there by herself. She had business partners. She had mentors. She didn't invest wisely by herself. And she certainly didn't create or support hundreds of women-owned businesses by herself. She has created the ecosystem through which others can also thrive. And as they thrive, she becomes even more successful. But ultimately, she also understands that you've got to be bold. And that's why she backs the entrepreneurs with a bold vision. We've come to the end of today's episode. I hope you've gotten something out of this journey into Polo Leteka's journey. You see, sometimes you just have to make your dreams become a reality through resilience, through courage, through determination, and never giving up. And when you do that, make sure you lift others up with you. Speaking of lifting others up, please don't just listen and watch this episode yourself and keep it to yourself. Tell your friends about it. Encourage them also to subscribe and like this video, just as you're doing. Because together we can create that ecosystem of success that will help to transform our beloved continent of Africa. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.
Tomorrow belongs to those people who prepare for it today. See you next week.